404. It's a good marriage song. When the battle's over, we shall wear a crown. That wasn't nice, was it? No, it wasn't nice. All right, 404, we'll sing all three verses. When the battle's over. Am I a soldier of the cross, a follower of the Lamb? And shall I fear to own his cause, or blush to speak his name? And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown in the New Jerusalem. Wear a crown, wear a crown, wear a bright and shining crown. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown in the New Jerusalem. When you get on that chorus, when we start, look at those two yeses. That's emphatic, all right? And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown 2 times, all right? You got it? All right, let's try it on the second verse. Must I be carried to the skies on flowery beds of ease, while others fought to win the prize and sailed through bloody seas? And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown in the New Jerusalem. Wear a crown, wear a crown, wear a bright and shining crown. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown in the New Jerusalem. On the last, please, together. Sure, I must fight if I would reign. Increase my courage, Lord. I'll bear the toil, endure the pain, supported by thy word. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown. Yes, we shall wear a crown. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown in the New Jerusalem. Wear a crown, wear a crown, wear a bright and shining crown. And when the battle's over, we shall wear a crown in the New Jerusalem. We're in a battle here, aren't we? The Bible says in Ephesians chapter 6 that every day we are to put on the whole armor of God. Why? That you may be able to withstand the wiles of the devil, and having done all to stand. We're in a battle. And I'm thinking about this. If you're in this room and you're married, the devil's going to try to destroy your marriage. And the devil's going to try to get you out of church and get you off your knees and out of the Word. We're in a battle. And I think about this. Some of you have been saved older than I am. And I just think about that. Does the battle still continue? The battle still continue. Good to see you tonight. I'm going to say this to you before we get going in the service. They would say this down south. You know, Kathy and I we're down south for a while in Louisiana. Y'all better stay after church or we're going to have enough food to feed you on Sunday. All right? You don't have to stay for games if you're not sociable, but you can stay for food. Ladies, you outdid yourself. Little Peyton told me this because Josh has got a Blackstone grill, and he said this, Grandpa, when my dad fires up that Blackstone and he puts avocado oil on and puts the chicken on, everybody's going to walk right past the hamburgers and go to my dad's grill. I don't know if that's true or not. But we got some good food. And ladies, I was looking at some of that. I think I'm just going to start on the dessert table. And if I have any room, I'll go to the other table. Good to see you here tonight. Let's bow our heads for a word of prayer. Brother Danny Sober, lead us tonight, would you please? Thank you, Brother Danny. Several announcements on the screen. These are all reminders. So this Wednesday night, we'll have the Harvest Trio with us. You'll want to be here. You really will. How many of you enjoy good Christian music? How many of you, when you're down, a song will pick you up? A song will pick you up. I remember years ago, and I've told you about it on the north side, and this happened repeatedly. I just was struggling with something. I didn't remember what it was, and we had a widow lady in our church, and she had a big old, if Alan was here, I'd ask him what year this was. I think 70-some model. It was a Ford Thunderbird, had a nose that stuck out there about 2.5 miles. And she said, Pastor, I'm having a problem with my car. And I said, duh, it's a Ford. And she said, would you? And I said, let me take it for a spin. And she had a cassette tape in there. And that tape, I need thee every hour, I need thee. And, I knew immediately what was wrong with that car. But I went around the block several times because the Lord reminded me. So we'll have some good music on Wednesday night. There will be a time to fellowship with this group. I hope that you're here, and please be here on time. Men's prayer breakfast will be this Saturday at 8 o'clock. I hope that you'll come and be a part of that. Men, let me thank you. Through the years, you have been faithful to this. And we usually have a group, 20, 22, 24 men. Different one of our men will bring the devotion. So Saturday morning at 8 o'clock. And I think there's one other. In his steps, the Shining Lights drama play will happen June the 6th, Friday. Now, some of you have asked, we're still going to have a Wednesday night service. So we're not foregoing that midweek service to put this in its place. We'll have 2 services that week. And so you'll want to be here, and you want to invite somebody. Invited somebody that we met, and he's supposed to come. He said, Pastor, I've got 9 kids. I said, bring them all. So do this. There's some invites. If you're going to invite somebody on the reception table, welcome table, there's some invites. Get those out. Have a neighbor or somebody come with you. I heard a testimony this afternoon coming to church. I don't know who this man is. He's a Scottish preacher, and he was preaching, and he said this. They were at Cambridge, and they were working for over 2 weeks with student groups there, evangelizing, and he went into a coffee shop. And there was a young gal in the coffee shop, and he invited her, said, we're here tonight. We have a meeting. Why don't you come? And she said, no, I don't think I can make it. And she said, you ought to come. And then she said, I'm really not interested. And he said, you ought to come. And she said, you know what? I'm really not a religious person. He said, you ought to come. And then she said, I'm not off that night. He said, you ought to come. That night, when she got off, that statement, you ought to come, you ought to come, you ought to come, just burned in her heart. She rode a bicycle 3 miles to come to that service. She was the first one down the aisle to be saved, and the man that invited her, that was his bride. He ended up marrying her. So you ought to come to this, all right? And just do the same thing, invite somebody and just ask them to come, and that'll be good if they come. Take your hymn, if you would, please. 288 as we stand to get ready for the offering tonight. 288 is a hymn number. As we stand to get ready for the offering, I am resolved. I am resolved no longer to linger, charmed by the world's delight. Things that are higher, things that are nobler, these hath allured my sight. I will hasten to him, hasten so glad and free. Jesus, greatest, highest, I will come to thee. I am resolved to go to the Savior, leaving my sin and strife. He is the true one, he is the just one, he hath the words of life. I will hasten to him, hasten so glad and free. Jesus, greatest, highest, I will come to thee. I am resolved to follow the Savior, faithful and true each day. Heed what he saith, do what he willeth, he is the living way. I will hasten to him, hasten so glad and free. Jesus, greatest, highest, I will come to thee. Brother Paul Brown, would you ask God's blessings on the offering, please?
Mighty God, we're so thankful to have a house to worship you in. Lord, we ask that you be with our outing tonight, be with all of the people that are in our church that are ill. And Lord, bless these tithes and offerings to your work here in Pueblo, Colorado. And we will give you all the glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Song before the special 397, little as much when God is in it. We'll sing all four verses, 397. In the harvest field is ripened, there's a work for all to do. Hark, the voice of God is calling, to the harvest calling you. Little is much when God is in it, labor not for wealth or fame. If you go and then win it, if you'll go in Jesus' name. Does the place you're called to labor seem so small and little known? It is great if God is in it, and he'll not forget his own. Little is much when God is in it, labor not for wealth or fame. There's a crown, and you can win it if you'll go in Jesus' name. Are you laid aside from service, body worn from toil and care? You can still be in the battle, in the great place of prayer. Labor not for wealth or fame. There's a crown, and you can win it if you'll go in Jesus' name. On the last, when the conflict here is ended and our race on earth is run, he will say to all the faithful, Welcome home, my child, well done. Little is much when God is in it. Labor not for wealth or fame. There's a crown, and you can win it if you'll go in Jesus' name. All right, before Miss Rogers, we got special music tonight. Before he or she or they come, somebody just give me a blessing, something you're thankful for. Say anything, a blessing, something you're thankful for. As Miss Rebecca, you're special tonight. Miss Karen, whatever. All right, Tamara. Amen. We're thankful for you. Darla, did you have your hand up?
Our grandson got bucked off the horse this last week, and he's doing better today.
Good.
So he's got a concussion and bruised
Yeah.
hips and ribs and everything, but he's getting better.
Was a horse. He got
Praying for him.
bucked off of a horse. That's why I don't get on horses.
Well, they were at a men's retreat, first day one.
Oh, you're kidding. The horse is okay. It's good to know. How many of you you like riding horses? You do? You do? Luann, was your hand up?
Yes, I want to say I'm thankful I'm not where I was last.
Amen. This time last year, were you at UC Health in Denver?
I went in, it was on a Sunday, but it would be tomorrow for Monday.
God is so good. Aren't you glad? All right, Miss Lucy? Amen. Good to have Jamie here. All right. There's an honor when we take care of our parents. And that's what the Bible expects. That word means to requite them or repay them. And Jamie, I'm glad to have you around, Mom. All right. Anybody else before? We can put them on ice for a while. All right. Weston, yes, sir.
Yeah, for our freedom.
Hey, amen. We spoke about it this morning. I believe this, Brother Vernon, you and I talk about it. The freedom we enjoy, you thank a vet. And some gave their lives, some gave all. I think about, and I know if he's watching from home, he's probably going to get upset at me. And LeVar's not the only one. When you see Brother LeVar here, it's a miracle. That man was blown up with an IED, went out to rescue some soldiers or sailors that were caught out at sea and was shot at when he's out there. And he's broken from stem to stern, and he's faithful. I never look at that man and like I look some of you vets and just think, thank God. I never wore the uniform. Thank God for those that did and what they mean to us. All right? Amen. Amen. All right, the ladies are going to play, and then Brother Josh will come. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see this if we can. Help me with this if we can. Brother Brad, you're not doing anything. All right. Let me see. How many pages we got on lesson 2? 2 pages. I think that'll do your side. Brother Paul, can you help us in the center section? Brother Danny, can you help us? Are you able to help us in this section? Brother Eric, can you take care of your section? Oh, wait a minute. Make sure they get 2 pages. Make sure you get 2 pages. I'm going to steal 2 from you, Brother Danny. Here's yours. Here's yours. All right, let me say this as the men are passing those out and before the ladies begin to play. If you missed lesson 1, we have notes and answers for any of the lessons you missed, because really, I don't know what lesson 2 is all about, but it builds on lesson number 1. And so, how many of you did that and got convicted? You filled out your schedule? Oh, no. Brother Bliss and I had a talk about that. We were going to talk to Brother Josh about it, but a pastor's schedule is always changing. All right? Make certain that everybody gets notes that wants notes. Brother Paul, thank you. Anybody else not put those on the Lord's Supper table, would you please? Everybody you get 2 pages. Everybody got 2 pages? Don't want you shorted. Last figures I looked at, and I don't know, Brother Josh may have some, I don't know about, and this is probably dated stuff. Almost 70% of Americans were in debt on credit cards to the tune that they could only make monthly payment. You realize that they set up that in such a way that you make only the monthly payment and you can have a credit card bill you'll never pay off. Say this to you, God has a better way to live financially. I don't know what these lessons or tonight's lesson is all about, but I'm certain it's some of that. All right. Ladies, you play, Brother Josh.
All right. Well, thank you guys for coming tonight. Pray that the weather continues to hold off for some food and activities later, right? It was not a pessimist, but it was not. Of course, you know, people in Colorado can't tell the weather anyway to begin with. Yeah, we should have already had three inches of rain drop by now, you know. And so the beginning of the week, I was looking at it, I was like, man, it's not looking too good for Sunday evening. It's going to be rainy, you know, 70%. And now I think it's going to start, but like maybe 10 o'clock. So we might get by. So thankfully, there's that. So thank you guys again for coming back this week. How many of you guys were able to accomplish some of your homework last week? Hey, you know, I'll take a little bit. I will take a little bit. If you were able to accomplish all of your homework, you get 2 stars, Marcus. Yes. All right. So if you were able to accomplish all of your homework from last week, then you get 2 stars. And then hopefully it was a good self-evaluation, especially when you got to the time portion, maybe to kind of see what time is, you know, necessary, but then what time is maybe deemed unnecessary. I mean, there's always time for rest and relaxation that is needed. I'll always have to make sure that's in there, but also some time that is not productive, and that some time that's a distraction, and that we can try to redeem some of that time that we get back to be able to use it once again as one of those things that God has given us to steward. As a pastor needs a set of notes.
Not me.
No.
For somebody else.
Okay. If anybody else need a set of notes besides pastor, we're good. Okay. All right. So just to redeem some of those resources that God has given us. So once again, last week we looked at kind of the framework of what that looks like with What is wealth? Wealth is what God gives us to accomplish His purpose. And we looked at Deuteronomy, and his covenant back then was to establish Israel, establish Abraham, and his covenant there, the Abrahamic covenant, and what that looked like. And Abraham was going to be blessed, and Israel was going to be blessed beyond belief. But we saw right there, before they were given all that land and given all those promises, right before they entered into Canaan, that they were warned. Because when you go into Canaan, when you go into there, as Joshua and Caleb came back and they said, man, it's flowing with milk and honey. Grapes are the size of cantaloupes. And, it's huge. It's full of luscious resources. And so they were warned, when you enter into that, just be careful, because you are going to be blessed beyond your imagination. You just wandered the desert, so you're going to be blessed beyond your imagination. But be careful to not forget who gave this to you, and that was, of course, God. And to not pull away from God, to just rely on your wealth and the resources that He's given to you, but to use them to accomplish His purpose. So we're going to look today as kind of another foundational principle. And then I hope to the last 2 weeks of this, week 3 and 4, to kind of build off these two of how we can really better ourselves and how we can benefit our lives and ourselves for the future using some of these principles and these resources that we've covered last week and this week. So let's go ahead and have a word of prayer and get started. Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us together, Lord. Thank you for this time where we can come together and look into your word that's timeless, and to be able to pull resources that we can apply into our life today. And thank you for everything that you have blessed us with, everything that you have given to us, Lord. And I want to thank you in my life personally for all the blessings that you've given me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity and ability to be able to teach others. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. All right, so the first, we're going to have some scripture there we're going to look at real quickly, and then we're going to kind of look at some other biblical passage as well, a biblical example there. So the first passage that we can see is Proverbs chapter number 22 and verse number 7. It says right there that the rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender. We all understand that principle from any aspect, but it was once again applied there in Proverbs, as it is showing you the rich rule over the poor, but you are servant. The borrower who borrows is going to be servant to the person who gives, the lender there. And then we have I'm going to break this one down a little bit more. We have a parable, once again, in Luke chapter 16 and verse number 10. Luke chapter 16 and verse number 10. He says, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is also unjust also in much." And it says, "If you therefore have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit your trust to true riches?" So this parable is actually a pretty interesting parable. There's a lot going on in here. First off, so it's a parable right there of the bad steward, really. And so, but a lot of parables were given to the disciples. But we will see some parables, even back in Luke chapter number 10, we'll see some parables that were also given to the Pharisees, because they were also gathering around, more so for curiosity's sake than anything, to catch Jesus saying something and that they could use against him. But this is the case here. We know that the Pharisees are here, so he is talking to the disciples, but also kind of directing some of the traffic as well to the Pharisees and their line of thinking here. So we had a steward here who, once again, a steward just as us with God's resources, is someone who manages his master's money or his master's resources. That's what God has entrusted to us with our money, with our time. They are a resource that we should be good stewards of. And so we have this master who gives the steward the full reign, and then he hears some word about some mismanagement. He was, clocking in for, 4 hours, but putting 8 hours on his time check or something, And so there was some mismanagement that he heard coming around of what was happening. So he thought, I'm going to have a talk with him. So he says, "Hey, we need to have a meeting. I heard there was some shenanigans going on. We need to have a meeting." Well, the guy already knew what the shenanigans were, so he started to get worried. And so what he does then is he's like, this is it. I'm going to lose my job. And he said, I can't be out on the street begging for money. That's not going to work for me. I'm not going to get a job because I'm going to have a bad reputation. He said, this is just not going to work. So I got to find a way to help myself out. And so before he has the meeting with his boss, the Bible tells us that he goes and he knows the vendors or the other people who are in business with his boss. And he says, hey, do you remember how much you owe my boss? And he's like, yeah, I think it's, like $10,000. He says, okay, I'll tell you what. Write me a check today for $5,000. We'll call it even. What? Are you serious? Oh, yeah, I'll go get my checkbook. And, no problem. We could half deal. Easy. He goes to the next guy. Hey, how much do you remember you owe my boss? I think it was, $2,000. Okay, no problem. I tell you what, $800, your debt is covered. Oh, yeah, I'll take that deal any day of the week. And what he was doing is helping himself out so that way when he essentially did get fired, that those people would in turn, they would owe him. And they would, when he goes back to them, be like, hey, remember, I cut you a deal $5,000. I'm going to need a favor. Because he knew the favor was going to be more to hear that. And it's an interesting principle because he fires him ultimately probably, but he also acknowledges his shrewdness. He actually admonishes it for his shrewdness, which is kind of an interesting turn of, what you would think. That's kind of interesting in that aspect. But he does admire that shrewdness, but the principle of it was that, look, if you can't be faithful with a little, then you can't be faithful with a lot. I entrust you with a little bit, and you messed up, and you in turn basically gave half it away, then I can't trust you with more. And so in turn, he was fired. And so we learn from that principle, and then also we understand there at the end, it also kind of tells us, it says there, verse number 13, that we understand the principle also that he ends it with, that no servant can serve two masters, for he will either hate the one or love the other, or else he will hold the one, despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon. And we understand that word serve there. It is giving a surrendered obedience to. And so he's trying to make the idea known that, look, you can't give your surrendered obedience to your wealth or to God. You have to do it one way or the other, just as that master was kind of serving himself or serving his master in the end. And so you got to be careful of that. That serve is that surrendered obedience. But like I said, he was kind of also talking to the Pharisees, and we can kind of see how they were, that was their main idea. They were all about the riches and their lifestyle and how that played out into their faith, really. And so that was also kind of a message as well to them. But I think as well, what does that mean, for us? We are a steward of God's resources. And how many times, are we shorting God, whether it's because of what we are, we're shorting him with our time and our waste of time, or our waste of money and what we spend it on and what we do with that resource that God has given us, and how we are just kind of wasteful of that, once again, trying to be mindful of that. So we understand that he that is faithful in that which is least is also faithful in much. And then we see Proverbs chapter number 21. Proverbs chapter number 21 and verse number 20. It says, there is treasure to be desired and oil in the dwelling of the wise, but a foolish man spendeth it up. So we understand oil. That was how you heated your houses. That's how that's how you made stuff. That was kind of an asset. That was a resource. So he had riches and oil in his house as a wise person, but the foolish spent it up unwisely. Now, if you go to the verse before that, you will see why there's so many men camping on the weekends in Colorado. And so we can see 3 verses right there off the bat. Some of these just went way overhead. I got a few people that it hit home. So we see a few verses right off their bat that we can understand from God's principles, from the Bible, of how we can learn to manage God's money wisely. And one of those things that we've got to be careful for is our debt that we put ourselves in. Because as we saw right there at the beginning, Proverbs chapter number 22, verse number 7, it says that borrower is servant to the lender. And any time that we put ourselves in that position, it is going to put us in a negative position to be able to do more things for God and to be able to use the resources that we could have wisely have had for His purpose. And that's we understand what our wealth is for. So the main point, number one, we're going to see is debt's danger. Debt's danger right off the bat. I'll give you a second to fill that in. So debt's danger, debt enslaves us. We understand, I can't get to that next point because it's going to go to pictures. I forgot there was a point before that. Okay, so there's a point to put up that you'll just have to wait. But debt enslaves us, okay? So with that being said, let's look at some just up-to-date statistics in America about debt and what it has done to our society, okay? So non-mortgage debt. So we understand there's some good debt and bad debt kind of related. Good debt is anything that has an asset that can be paid for more than the debt is worth. But a bad debt, non-mortgage debt, the average American, that breaks it down for your age group, how much debt the total group holds averaged out to the individual. So my age group is in that second one now. But my age group holds $1.1 trillion worth of debt, averaging out to $26,000 per person of debt, non-mortgage debt. We understand that. So that's not, okay, I have a house. I understand that. That's a significant amount of debt a lot of times, okay? Then you can break it down. Actually, what we're also finding out, and I don't think it's on there, what we're also finding out is, so millennials are, we got excited about debt a lot of times. Gen Z is actually, we're seeing, is actually saving more money. I don't know, they got scared by, I don't know, all COVID and everything going on. Gen Z is actually trying to save more money, but it also helps that they still live in their parents' basement. But anyway, so you can always see all the way down there how much an average individual of even your age, if you look at your age category, is holding of debt. That's the average American. Now go to the next slide. This is a huge one that I believe, there's two major debt implications I believe that are really are holding Americans hostage, and are going to continue for the foreseeable future until it's really corrected. To me, it's student loans and auto debts. Student loans, there's a significant burden on student loans. A lot of them had this idea that it'd be paid off by somebody else, or that they would have a job that would pay it off pretty quickly after. And even on medical side, you understand, even a doctor, they're going to hold probably about $500,000 worth of student loan debt. And residency, you're making what, $45,000, $50,000 for residency until you actually make some doctor money once you go through residency. And even then, you've got to understand that's going to take a while to pay off. But even to some degree, I understand that that's a good paying job in the long run. But a lot of children, I will say that, have been sold on a lot of ideology of college programs. And that's just the sheer basis of, here, you're going to go get your student loan, you're going to get this degree, and you're going to go change the world. And they have a degree in things that don't really either have that much significance, or there's really not that much of a payout, to be honest, And so that puts them in a significant financial burden. But again, the second one, I believe, is with the auto loan debt. So Americans at the end of 24, have a record $1.6 trillion in auto loan debt, 20% increase since 2020. It accounts for 9% of the American consumer debt. So it actually jumped student loan debt, and now it sits right below the mortgage debt. So we have houses that are an asset actually worth something, and we have cars or auto loans that depreciate significantly that are now above even student loan debt as the second highest debt in consumer debt in America. So it surpassed it in quarter four, so the last quarter of 2024. The next slide there, here's the breakdown on the average auto loan debt. So it grew 2.1%. So the average auto loan is $24,297. It's an increase about 5% from 23. But the average auto loan payment is $662 a month, which most of you can remember when that was double your house payment, which is ridiculous for me. But I remember when my house payment started, I mean, it has gone up with insurance and taxes, but when my house payment started, it was $867, okay? $662, that's pretty close to a house payment. All right, as many of you saw my breakdown last week of when Rachel and I were first married, which was not that long ago, okay? When we were first married, our rent for the month was $550. So my rent was $550. I can't imagine paying $660 on an auto loan, with that being said. Okay, so auto loans, I mean, if you look at the statistics of car prices and vehicle prices, I mean, they're surpassing. You can now do a 72-month, I think even an 84-month auto loan. When you're going into the 80s, 90s, and even hundreds of thousands of dollars for not a Ferrari. We're talking a, Alan's not here to beat up on, but I was going to say a Ford. We're talking about just a Chevy truck can cost anywhere of $90,000 to $100,000. And so that is a crippling fact that can put you under, that's hard to recover from all on its own. Now, understandably, I understand if one has the wealth and that makes sense in their mindset, then they can use that as a deduction. If it's over a certain 10,000 pounds, you can use it as a business deduction. So you can go buy a G-Wagon and write it off. But that's not the case most of the time. So we understand that is one thing that is crippling, is part of the auto loans and student loans right there as well. Go to the next slide, okay? You can now finance a hot dog at Costco. Okay, now many of you laugh, but we will go into debt for anything. There is something now called Affirm. And I don't know if you've probably seen it. You can, when you buy something, anything online, it'll say, with Affirm, you can make a low monthly payment of. But yeah, no joke, you can now finance a $1.50 hot dog at Costco. Here's the breakdown of 4 payments. Or 5 payments of 37 cents, 37.5 cents. So the idea is we will go into debt for literally anything, even a hot dog, a Costco hot dog at $1.50. Okay? Now, like I said, debt will, it holds you, and it can hold you hostage from being able to be more generous to others, be able to produce more for the kingdom of God. And what Pastor mentioned right off the bat, I believe, is the next slide, okay? This is a credit card balance. And this is, I'm just going to be honest, this is my personal credit card balance for my business, okay? So understand, a lot of our expenses we throw on a business credit card because we get a lot of rewards points off of it. I can get a lot of rewards points off of it. There are already expenses that we are already going to expend, and we pay them off at the end of every month, okay? So this was our expense for May. You can see May 9th there. It was a $26,000 balance for the month, okay? The scary thing is not that balance, okay? The scary thing is, when you look down there, here's a screenshot. It says minimum payment due. That means I can hold a $26,000 balance on my card. I can satisfy that by paying $101. This was a screenshot from the card in May. And that to me is scary. Because like I said, this is for our business. It's something that we don't sweat because it's expenses that we expense to vendors and whatnot. We're already going to put that money out. It's typical everyday expenses, and so we gain the rewards off of it. So it's not the balance that scares me. When I saw that, I'm like, this is scary. And you understand how some people can get in such a spiral with credit card debt, and with that being, hey, don't worry, I can make the minimum payment. Even to the degree of like the auto loan. When you go and buy a car, they don't sell you on the price. They sell you on the payment. And that's what you got to be careful for. They'll get you in the finance office and they'll put it on a piece of paper and they'll say, okay, which one of these options work for you? We've got you at 36 months at, $495. We've got you at, 48 months at $592. We've got, which one works for you? Go ahead and sign there. And because they want to sell you on the payment, because they break it down and the payment seems more feasible. I can make a $100 payment any month. No problem. I can make that personally. But I'm not making a $26,000 payment. But if I make a $101 payment, guess what happens? I have a 16% APR, and that's going to raise my, if I didn't spend any more money the next month, now that takes it and puts it into the 30,000, the 30,000 range. And okay, so my payment's what, $120 that month, maybe then, $130. I can make that payment too. But one time, I kid you not, I was listening to a business podcast, and there was a caller that called in, and they said, right off the bat, they started with, what do you do when you can't make the minimum payment? And that's a scary fact too, because you already know that the minimum payment is significantly less and very, very small to be able to be achieved. But when this person has racked up, I think they were over $100,000, $200,000 in credit card debt alone, and they understood that they can't even make the minimum payment because of their lifestyle, because of their waste with that. And so I want to caution you right off the bat, okay? That debt, you got to be careful because it is going to put you in a dangerous position. I think the next slide over. Good news is, if you have no debt and you have $10 in your pocket, you are more rich than 25% of Americans, which is also a crazy statistic. That is just mind-boggling, okay? I got $10, no debt. I'm richer than, I'll leave it there. Anyway, which is sad to say, okay? But you have more wealth than 25% of Americans, okay? So your next blank there, debt enslaves us, limiting our freedom to serve God. Our freedom to serve God. So a lot of times you think, well, this credit card is going to give me freedom, or this when I put this on a loan, it's going to give me freedom. It's going to help me be able to live my life or to get through my life. What we understand is the more we add on, the more we keep putting ourselves in those positions, it restricts our lifestyle, restricts our freedom to be able to serve God like He would have us. We don't have the ability to say, yes, God, I would like to give more. I would like to, when we have missionaries come in and when we have Faith Promise coming up, when we have that emphasis coming up of what, hey, I'd love to give $10 a month to support a missionary. But I can't because I'm buried in this loan and this debt and I'm consumed. And so we understand that debt enslaves us and it limits our freedom to serve God. We're going to see some more of that later in the biblical example. Number 2, our faithful management. Faithful management, our faithful financial decisions lead to greater opportunities. Our small, faithful financial decisions lead to greater opportunities. Like I say, right off the bat, even if it seems small, did you know, now I know I'm talking to myself and you and maybe some people in the back, but from the age 25 to 65, you can do it from 30 to 70, 25 to 65, 30 to 70, if all you did, sidebar, did you know who the most millionaires are of just your 9-to-5 job? Teachers. Anyway, teachers who make probably the smallest salary and have to buy, but because of their faithfulness. But anyway, if you from 25 to 65 or 30 to 70, just invest $100, and we're going to talk about investments and strategies a little bit later, but just $100 a month, which doesn't seem like a lot, especially when you're in your younger age, probably 25 to 30, all the way up. Hopefully by 40, 50, you've been at your job and have gotten a raise a little bit. But $100 a month, that's all it would take. $100 a month from 25 to 65 or 30 to 70 will lend you $1.1 or $1.2 million if it's in a standard investment that nets about average of 8%, which the S&P would average. $100 a month. So that's just an idea of some small, faithful financial decisions that lead to great opportunities. Because guess what? Later in life, when you have that, the opportunities of you being able to give, to help others, because that's what it is, right? The wealth to be able to further God's kingdom, to be able to help others, to be able to put it beyond your own selfish desires. It's not about what you can accumulate and how far you can get, but being able to help others. So having those that faithful management. Even though it may seem small, some of those little decisions, not putting your hot dog on a payment plan, okay? Some of those little decisions can lead to the ability to have great opportunities to be able to serve God, to be able to have the freedom to be able to give to others, to live a life that we aren't controlled by our debt. We can maybe take a little bit extra time off to spend with our family because, you know what, I don't need to be slaving at work because, hey, 20, 30 years ago, I made some financial decisions that have led up and I can take a little bit more time off. I can spend some time with family. I can do some things like that. So the faithful management is going to have that aspect. Small, faithful financial decisions that are going to lead to great opportunities, okay? And like I said, every week we're going to incorporate time aspect to it because that is a resource as well as money. Time is a resource that we have to be careful not to waste and be wasteful with because that's something that God has given us. So our time management, we need to prioritize high impact tasks to achieve goals. So I had you guys start off last week by putting together that time audit to see where's my time going. What am I doing with it? How am I using it? Am I wasting it somewhere where everybody needs rest and relaxation, but is there some distractions that I'm doing that I could probably not be doing? Is there a way to redeem the time with what I'm doing? And so we should prioritize our tasks, our high impact tasks to achieve goals. So hey, we all have tasks. We all have things that we need to accomplish. But what are some high impact tasks that we have that could help us achieve whether our financial goals or help us to achieve our spiritual goals? I'd like to read, 2 books of the Bible I'd like to read a book of the Bible every week. Or I would having a spiritual goal. Okay, I have a high impact task that I'm gonna have to prioritize here. So that task has got to go above, binge watching on Netflix for 3 hours or whatever it is, the new show that just released, or, I'm not going to throw you under, but standing in line at Culver's for an hour, at Whataburger for an hour just to get a burger. We went to Whataburger yesterday and saw LeVar and Marcus also there. And I went inside because I wasn't going to waste the diesel standing in the drive-thru. That was my idea. So he didn't want to stand up because he hurt. So LeVar did, so he went in the drive-thru. But ultimately, that should have gotten lowered because I was actually severely disappointed. I will give them one more chance past all their rush of opening, but just let it. Yeah, don't stand in line to go to Whataburger just to have a disappointing burger. Okay, so I could have had a high impact task that I could have prioritized, maybe a little bit better than that. That would make more of an impact. So our time management, look at those things, put our tasks into perspective, and to help organize our structure. Help us. We saw what our structure looks like last week by being able to do a time audit. Saw some of the tasks that we do. Okay, how can we adjust these to make these more impactful? Maybe like it says, there are some examples. I'm learning something. I'm paying off debt. I'm doing something for the kingdom of God. I'm spending time. I'm doing something like that is a little bit more impactful than other things. Okay, our biblical example for the day. Our biblical example is the widow with oil. Let's go to 2 Kings and read this passage. 2 Kings chapter number 4 and verse number 1. It says, "Now there cried a certain woman of the wives of the sons of the prophets unto Elisha, saying, Thy servant my husband is dead, and thou knowest that thy servant did fear the Lord, and the creditor is come to take unto him my 2 sons to be bondmen." Okay, right there, we have a major problem, right? What happened? We had a husband we have a family who got themselves into some debt. Right away, we have debt, and we saw right there at the beginning, debt's danger. It's putting a stranglehold on them. They're not having the freedom because now the husband didn't have life insurance back then. Now the husband is not living, and culture time back then, a lady can't just, okay, my husband's dead, so I'm going to go out and find myself a 40-hour-a-week job. That's just not going to work with culture back then. It's not going to be how it plays out. And so we have to understand they're in a crippling position because of this debt that they incurred for whatever reasons. I don't think they had, health insurance, medical bills. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Doesn't say. But we understand now she's in a bad position, obviously because of the debt that has put her in danger. So right there. And then the number 2, it says, and Elisha said unto her, what shall I do for thee? He's like, well, I can't just support you. I can't write you a check every week. Tell me, what hast thou in the house? And she said, thy handmaid hath not anything in the house save a pot of oil. She says, I don't have anything. We're broke. There's nothing in the house. We sold everything. I've got maybe a little bit of oil in a pot. That's all I have. And it says, verse number 3, says, then he said, go and borrow 3 vessels abroad, and thy neighbor and all thy neighbors, even empty vessels. Borrow not a few. He says, don't get a few of them. Get every container that you can find. And when thou art come in, thou shalt shut the door upon thee and on thy sons, and shalt pour it out into those vessels. And thou shalt set aside that which is full. So she went from him, shut the door upon her and her sons, who brought the vessels to her, and she poured out. Notice something. There was an immediate response. Okay? That immediate response shows faith. It doesn't say that she questioned, well, how am I, I'm only going to fill but 1 vessel. It doesn't say that. She took that from Elisha, a man of faith. She had an immediate response of faith and went and did as he told her. And so she went, and it came to pass when the vessels were full that she said unto her sons, bring me yet a vessel. And he said unto her, there is not a vessel more. And the oil stayed. So the sons kept bringing them. She filled them up. And she had more. She's like, I need another vessel. I need another pot, a barrel. Go to Home Depot, get a 5-gallon jug. Go to Harbor Freight. They're cheaper there. And he says, they're all out. I bought everything they have. There's no more. There's not one more to be had. So then she came and told the man of God, and he said, go sell the oil and pay thy debt, and live thou and thy children off the rest. And so right there, we understand God performed a miracle because she had just but a little bit of oil. Nothing else in the house but just a little bit of oil. God, as we know, performed a miracle. But I believe that it was because of the faithfulness, the belief, the faith that she had, but the faithfulness that, okay, this is what we're going to do. She didn't say, I'm sure she was thinking in her mind, this is crazy. And she gets the first vessel. She takes that jug and starts filling it up. And she's doing this. And then it fills up. And she's like, that's weird. That's the same exact amount I had in there when I started. And so she grabs the next vessel, fills it up, and looks in there again, sees there's still some more, and just keeps going and going. And she had a faithfulness about her. She had a faith right there at the beginning, but she had a faithfulness as well. So we see her faith, that's a blank for you, her faith and resourcefulness, guided by Elisha, cleared her debt and provided abundance. So right away, she had the faith, she had the resourcefulness, the faithfulness to do what the man of God told her, but then she was able to pay for her debt. She was able to clear it. So can you imagine this? Can you imagine the little boy knocking on your door and be like, hey, my mom, he's usually sugar. My mom needs a bucket for some oil. He's like, oh, I don't know. Okay, here you go, buddy. No, it has to be empty. Okay, fine. Fine. This is all I found in the garage. There you go. Then can you imagine, I don't know, a day later, he comes back and he's like, would you like to buy some oil? He's like, wait a minute, that's my bucket. He's like, wait a minute. What's going on here? This is suspicious. But it says right there that they went and they sold the oil back to their neighbors. That's what they did. Probably the same neighbors that they borrowed the buckets from. What a deal, though. They sent it out. Hey, that's eco-friendly. They were doing it way before the 2000s, okay? They had a Green New Deal, too. That's eco-friendly. They had something going on, but they were able to take that. They were able to sell the oil, pay off their debt, and then also had more than enough than the debt to also live off of, her and her sons, it says right there, to live off of. So we understand right there that her faith and resourcefulness was able to do that, and that it cleared the debt and it provided the abundance there. So real quick, I want us to see our practical applications, okay? So our practical applications. Number one, our debt snowball, okay? So our debt snowball. So you think, okay, I am there. I've got some things that are kind of holding me hostage. There are some things that maybe some small personal loans or some car loans or some student loans or whatever it is that I would have a lot more that I would be able to be faithful with and to be able to plan a life for me and those past me with, but how can I get there? So one of the things we can understand is taking a debt snowball to say, all right, let's list our debts. What do we have? What do we have right off the top? You have $1.50 to Costco. Okay, you got a hot dog last week, all right? Well, there's another $1.50. Stop getting the Costco hot dogs on the debt, okay? But so you list them from smallest to largest, and okay, that $1.50, in all fairness, you can probably go to your couch, scrounge up some change, and pay that one off right away. You can go do that one Monday. Find a $1.50 worth of change in your couch cushions, and go pay your hot dog off at Costco. Hey, guess what? That's a check mark. Now you no longer have to wake up in the morning thinking, I owe Costco $1.50 on Affirm for a hot dog. Well, if we list them from our next bill, and so we can understand that debt snowball, we can help start paying off our debt right away to try to help get us into a good position where we can gain some traction with our life. Number two, time management, okay? Say no. How many of you guys have a hard time saying no? Okay, you don't even have to raise your hand. Everyone who scored high on the mercy for the gift test, you have a hard time saying no. Am I right? Amen. Okay. And that's not a bad thing sometimes, but sometimes it is a bad thing because sometimes you have to be able to tell someone no or even to tell yourself no, you know. Say no to low priority tasks to focus on your financial or personal goals. So we're all going to have low priority tasks in our life. Back in the day, playing Candy Crush or Farmville or whatever it was. Okay, so there's going to be some low priority tasks that we can understand. This really isn't going to help me. It's not necessary. It's not going to help my health. It's not, it's not priority. It's just kind of a low priority. And if I say no to that, then it's going to give me more time to be able to accomplish something either financially or spiritually or a personal goal that I have set for myself. So be careful with that. So time management, say no. Just say no. You can do it to the low priority tasks to focus on that. Number three, prayer. Prayer. Ask God for wisdom to manage your resources faithfully. Is that what the widow did? She went to Elisha. She said, I don't know what to do. Pastor, I don't know what to do. My husband died. I don't have anything. The debtors, he's going to come take my kids. And, some of us would be like, okay, here they are. Some of us would be like, how long are you going to have them? Okay, are they going to be fed? Perfect. Okay, I'll see you in like a year. I'll pay you off and then we'll get them back or something, But, but she's like, they're going to take my sons. But we understand her sons were the ones who were going to work, probably. Okay, her sons were the only ones who could work because she wasn't allowed to work. So she says, well, my husband just died. There went my income stream. And guess what? My sons are going to be gone. There goes my only income stream. Now I'm going to be tied up. And so she asked God for wisdom to manage the resources faithfully. So prayer, ask God for wisdom in that. So reflection, okay? You guys are going to answer this because you are a good class. I got a little bit of participation last week. But how does debt impact your ability to serve God's purpose? Someone give me an answer. You're too busy thinking about that 37 cents you have to pay Costco. Yeah, you're too busy running around working your 80 hours, or you're too busy worried about being able to do anything else for God because you don't have the freedom of mind, really. You don't have the ability, you don't have the freedom of mind in that. Anybody else? I'm going to get two people for one question.
That creates fear.
Creates a lot of fear. Just like the widow, she was afraid. It created bondage, some fear. Okay? You're looking around, You're looking around the next corner you're not answering your phone calls because they're all collectors. This will get you guys. You unplug it. Now I know who I'm talking to. All right, because you don't want to hear from the collectors. You stop replying to emails, and they are relentless. Okay, I'll give you a funny story real quick. They're relentless. I've never had the, I don't think the issue with having collectors call me, but one time, this was last March, I get a letter from the IRS, and those are never good, right? You never want to just see it sitting in your mailbox to begin with. But sure enough, it was from the IRS, and I'm like, oh great, it's in March, taxes have already been filed, so something's either wrong or, and so I open it up, and I kid you not, they were sending me to collections. Yes, they were sending me to collections, and they was like, here's yours being sent to collections, here's the information, here's who, the agency that we're going to send you to. You can get a hold of them if you want, but and they give you a time in I don't know, it was 30 days or, they gave me a time, April 12th or whatever it is. We will officially send this over to collections. And I'm like, what in the world? Okay, but here's the crazy thing. What they were sending over to collections was a $14 bill. Yeah. And I hadn't gotten a notice before. It was for our business. I hadn't gotten a notice before. This was the first notice I received. Okay? And don't mind you that we pay taxes every other week for payroll to the IRS. So I'm like, I just paid you $450, and you guys are worried about $14. So literally, I got on the phone, and I was like, okay, first notice, and then it's just, you're going to collections. This is it, 30 days, you're going to collections for $14. So I got on the phone, and I was like, I didn't even get a notice. I didn't get one before, or one before that, or how many ever you're supposed to send out. I didn't even get one. This is the first one. And I was like, for a second, how'd this even happen? Because our stuff, most of it auto pays for payroll taxes and stuff like that. And they're like, and it was some I don't know, it was some error or something like that. And I was like, I'll pay it over the phone. Oh, no, you can't pay it over the phone. Of course not. It's the IRS. They will make it as difficult as possible. She's like, you have to go log in and create an account. I'm like, okay, that sounds easy. So I go log in and create an account. And it's like, we have to send you a PIN to verify your account. Well, guess what? The PIN takes 2 weeks. So I'm like, man, I'm cutting down on my $14, being on collections. And so you wait for the PIN to come in, and you get the PIN, you got to go back online to verify your account. And then once you verify your account, then you have to add your bank account. But guess what? That takes a week. And so I was getting down to the wire to pay this $14 bill, which is absurd, right? But it's ridiculous. So yeah, it creates fear. I mean, there was that fear of opening that, what is this letter from the IRS? I don't want to know. Thankfully, it was only $14, but something crazy like that, it can cause fear. So number 2, reflection. What is one time-wasting habit that you can eliminate this week? I'm going to make somebody give me one, okay? All right? It gets us all, right? Sitting in front of the computer, wasting some of our time away there, our digital devices a lot of times. So we can look at that, reflect with that. Now your homework, okay? You have homework. I need you to read that passage again with the oil, with the widow. And I want you to journal how her faith applies to your finances. How can that apply to you? Her situation and her faith apply to you. And then number 2, I want you to draft a debt repayment plan, if that is applicable to you, and identify one time-wasting habit to cut. Now, see, a habit is different than, maybe a task, okay? So there's some low-priority tasks that we looked at, but all of us, I think, have some habits that are something that are continual, that we realize this is a time-wasting habit that I could stand to get rid of. And I could pick up a good habit in its place that's going to help me,